Welcome everyone to Buddha Center. Today we're talking about Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, and specifically the section on the medium scope that deals with the Four Noble Truths and then deals with the 12 links of dependent origination. And specifically, we're just finished up the section on the 6 types of suffering. And today we'll, take a look at, that first noble truth again in a very detailed way so that we know exactly what it is that we find distasteful, what it is that we want to be freed from, what it is what it means to be bound in some way. And this section of the Lam Rim is so indispensable. In reading a lot of different texts, you see how it all ties into everything up to the highest level of relating to sentient beings when you're a Buddha. And being able to have the connection to all of these types of understandings of suffering. We have to, understand everything about everyone, about ourselves first, and then about everyone else, so that we can truly help them. And the first step is to truly understand our plight, to know the problem that we have, and identify what it is exactly, so that we say, hey, this isn't something that I want to have any longer. Why am I having it? Why am I constantly dissatisfied when I seem to have all the things that I really need? Why is there a sense of dissatisfaction, a gnawing kind of problem with even the good things that I have in terms of my ability to hold on to them with the same kind of feeling that I had? The same kind of elation that I've had, no matter what it is, it seems that that elation goes away. And it's part of what we're talking about today, the 3 types of suffering, the actual suffering of change, which is happiness, the feeling of happiness that we normally think is good, and kind of the bomb that's in it, the bait that it is, that's keeping us in a prison, that it tastes a little sweet, but it's poisonous. And this is what we come to understand. And this is knowledge that we would never understand in terms of identification of the first noble truth if we were just trying to say, hey, I don't like it when I get a bruise, or I don't like it when I get the flu, or I don't like it when these kind of coarse, terrible, tragic events happen in life. Because if you live 100 years, you'll have ups and downs. And you'll be able to convince yourself in some ways that the next thing or something else or just a little more will be what makes it all okay. But there's a gnawing feeling all the time that it's not quite okay. And that gnawing feeling that it's not quite okay is identified by the Buddha. And kind of shown to us in a logical way why the things within cyclic existence are a problem, and why we'll never get what we want or keep pleasant things around us forever until we, get rid of the things that cause the opposite. And the Buddha was so skillful in showing us the full perspective so that we weren't limited in our understanding, because the limited understanding, like in Dharmakirti's Pramanavartikakarika, it talks about if our idea of renunciation, of wanting to be free, is only connected to some displeasurable feeling, some types of suffering that we're just actually angry at, so we just can't take it anymore. I can't have another broken leg. I can't lose another loved one. And then there's kind of a hollow thing that's created that you can trick yourself into thinking is renunciation, when it's really just anger at a particular event, a displeasure with that. And then once that fades away and, the tragedy, the days get further and further away, and other things start to kind of, fill in the gaps of that hole that the tragedy made. It seems that it just tends to make us think that, hey, there's something that we can grasp for that isn't tragedy. But the fact is that this tragedy that keeps happening again and again and again can only be stopped if we stop what causes it. So sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. I was like 3 steps ahead of my point. But yes, so the identification of the truth of suffering is imperative, but the identification of the truth of suffering that we wouldn't normally think about is the most important part, because that's what's going to make us, really day and night try to work towards something better, instead of day and night trying to work for something different than in samsara, than the particular situation that we have. So we have a tragedy and we think that, oh, we want it. This is my point before about Dharmakirti. We have a tragedy and we think, oh, I really just want out of this. And as soon as that suffering feeling goes down a little bit, and then good things kind of that you think are good in cyclic existence, that you'll be separated from eventually, but or you'll find distasteful, kind of fill in its space, then this desire to emerge from cyclic existence you thought you had, this kind of throw yourself into your spiritual practice that you thought was true renunciation, was really hollow and just based on your anger at an event. So we have to distinguish between, what that is and what true renunciation is. And the only way that we can do that is if we find we want to definitely emerge from every type of happiness that one can achieve in cyclic existence. So this is a taller task than, hey, I got to Buddhism kind of broken. I got to Buddhism kind of confused. And, I wanted to be freed from that. If kind of the dissatisfying state gets filled in with just some kind of coarse details, you may just find that, oh, well, that's satisfying enough, and just move on once your difficult state of life has kind of gone down a little bit. And this is the real reason why in the Lam Rim there's such an emphasis on this First Noble Truth. And this First Noble Truth is emphasized when you study bodhicitta in terms of how you relate to other sentient beings and help them. So that's why we're spending the amount of time that we are on it, so that we can understand what it is we want to definitely emerge from. We can understand that it's not just the kind of things we consider the bad things in life. The things we consider the good things in life are just kind of poisonous bait. And until we understand that, and until we understand that those things are going to eventually, make us suffer, no matter what it is, if we have this hobby that makes us so happy, fill in your blank, we'll eventually lose our capacity to even do that hobby. It depends on what it is, but we'll lose our capacity to do that, whether it's a physical, painting, our eyes start to not be able to do it as well. I've known artists who have this, and then you have to kind of adjust and say, now I'm doing more abstract work. Now I'm just going into a different mode, but you really, truly just want to paint that beautiful thing, but you just have to adapt, because you're separated from, it just doesn't have within it permanent happiness. It doesn't have within it that thing you thought it was giving you, that was making you so satisfied that you didn't work at spiritual practice. And that's why it's poisonous bait, because it seems at the time like it's going to give you this kind of permanent fulfillment, but it turns it out to have just been a distraction that in the end is a great source of suffering. Because if that's all you wanted to do all your life and you can't do it anymore, then what do you do? Then you throw yourselves into spiritual practice. Well, by that time, now I'm talking about not being able to see, not being able to move my hands as a guitar player, not having a voice that anybody wants to hear. One of our teachers is very sick now. I've heard him kind of do some ditties and sing when he was well. Right now, I wouldn't want to hear him sing. I mean, it just, he wouldn't be able to sing. He didn't have the power to even sing 2 lines of those things. So if all he cared about, which thank goodness, that wasn't something he really cared about. It was just something he, did to entertain us at times. But if that was all that mattered to Genla, and emptiness wasn't all that mattered to him, then imagine now you're just waiting. You don't only had you be able to sing. That was it. That's all you had. That was your thing. That's all that mattered to me was my singing. And now I can't do that. And now I'm laying there and I have my mind. I can't really stand up as well. My body's just, letting go. We saw it with Kensei Geshe Wanda, but he had his mind, he had his mind and his ability to penetrate reality with that mind and stay in meditation. And the problem with all the other stuff, other than this kind of evolution, spiritual path, is that it doesn't lead to where you really want to go, and that's freedom from suffering and happiness. So this is what's so important to understand about cyclic existence. And it isn't just, the bad times. No, I can't believe, the horrible wars that have broken out, and imagine someone being tortured and, these types of things. It's, the happiest moment that we've had in cyclic existence was a ticking time bomb. And we admit it, if we're honest. We admit it. We admit that. And then we have something to compare what we think as happy as we could be to. So we go to parties to try to make ourselves happy, and we go to this really incredible party that's like beyond all other parties. Then it's like, well, this party was all right, we were just at, but it wasn't like the one that was last year. We just have all these perspectives that we think these moments that we're in are something other than the poisonous bait of cyclic existence. And so it sounds like then, I shouldn't enjoy anything ever again. No, you're putting your foot down on not enjoyment. So it's a totally different perspective than one would think when you hear the first part of this conversation. You're putting your foot down on things that are just at their kind of core dissatisfying. I'm putting my foot down on that which comes about through, contaminated karmas and afflictions. I'm putting my foot down on things that turn into suffering that I thought were going to be so incredibly satisfying forever. And then this body that was, so youthful at one point in time where I could just do anything that I wanted to do. Now I, put my foot down on the floor. It's like with a thud. They talk about like a sack falling when you go sit into a chair as you get older. It's like a sack just falling down as opposed to just getting down like, you just don't even have the strength anymore. I put my foot on the ground and it just feels like a thud and then pain. And I wonder, will I, today, am I going to, be able to sit in meditation posture without this old age sickness, old age stuff that kind of comes together, getting in the way of spiritual practice. So all sentient beings will again and again have to experience this disintegration of youth, thinking that all the things around you that you crave are going to be a source of happiness, and then they just fall short. Thinking that all of your things that you hate so much are so permanently hateful, and then you kind of realize that you just know people that you dislike greatly, that you may have fallen in love with later, or people that you love so much that you became people you dislike greatly. So like, I don't know, this kind of idea that there's this thing out there that I should be angry at, or this thing out there that I should, kind of be attached to, and the reason that I'm drawn to this thing where I'm attached is because I feel that it's not the suffering of change. The suffering of change is the mind and mental factors in the object. It's I don't crave after something until I comprehend it. So that the suffering of change is loaded in samsara. Samsara is the place and its inhabitants. It's not a place like New York or New Jersey. It's the place my mind creates. And the inhabitants, the place, the chair over there, the dog over there. But what does that mean? There's nothing external? No. The Buddha says, yes, there's an external screen that you're painting the way you make it. You're making it into the way you make it. And your neighbor makes it the way they make it in such a similar way because you have similar karmas to make it. And winds that are creating a world that looks like that. And it's amazing that we could be so under a delusion that sees everything just that so differently, sees it all as having concrete objective existence from its own side. I have concrete objective existence from my own side. You have concrete objective existence from your own side. And then from that idea, then I'm value everything around me, but it's all in dependence upon a projection of mine. Or we'd all like chocolate, or we'd all like vanilla, or we'd all like pink, or we'd all like blue, or we'd all like purple, or we'd all like dogs, or we'd all like cats, or we'd all like Mercedes, or we'd all like Chevys. We'd all buy American, or we'd feel like buying American is some sort of like racist thing. There's like so many things when you look at what your thing is and how you relate to the world, and how I think an antique is just ridiculous. And my grandmother filled her house with antiques and covered them with plastic because they were so precious. And I literally, if I was cold enough, would burn it. If it was, if I didn't know I could just have sold it that day, or like just to get something that wasn't old and broken. It's just incredible what we do when we create a world, through the power of our mind. This is in the, we read in Umagumurapsel, the middle way autonomy school says it's the power of our mind. If it can't be real the way we think it is, if there's this power of our mind, how can it be as real as we believe it to be? We'll think about the things like, oh, I love that over there, I love this over there, and people walk in and think, ugh, how can we think it's anything different than through the power of our mind? There's stuff out there. I got no problem with the stuff. As soon as you say stuff, it's a little shaky, but there's dependent origination out there. There's parts and stuff. But then how come I don't see the parts and the part possessor? I just see this possessor and I see him as separate entities. Anyway, this is a whole talk that Lama Tsongkhapa gets into in the Illuminating the Intent that's really, really, really beautiful. And I encourage you all to read it. So this is something really beautiful that we have here in front of us, this opportunity to learn more about our minds, to learn more about how we can be more at ease in the short run if we're doing practice for an extended period of time. I don't mean like hours in a day. I mean days after days after days and weeks and then months and then years and then more years. We'll have these kind of short-term kind of peace of mind, but ultimately this is the only pathway to permanent peace, the only pathway to permanent freedom from suffering and permanent bliss that goes from bliss to bliss to bliss. The only way that we can cultivate that happiness that only the Buddha has is by first generating bodhicitta that wishes to work for all sentient, become a Buddha for the sake of everyone. And this is now the part where we start to mimic what the Buddhas do, because we will become Buddhas. And the way we'll do what we do is by creating a mind before we're Buddhas that's concordant with what Buddhas do. So it's that simple. We think of cause and effect. We want a corn, we're going to plant a corn seed. We want a mind that, wishes day and night to become awoken for the sake of everyone. We have to put stuff in the minds that come before it that would give rise to that state of mind called bodhicitta. Just like we would have to put the seed of corn and the water and all this different stuff. And then we could, end up with a ear of corn at the end that we were looking for. If we wanted that ear of corn, we'd need to start with some stuff before ear of corn. So if we want ear of corn, bodhicitta, we have to do the things that come before having the bodhicitta. And we know that we have the various practices, the 7-point cause and effect for achieving the mind that aspires to enlightenment and equalizing and exchanging self with others, that this practice that we do before each teaching should be, at your own individual level saturated with. And we're only doing this so that as much as you can throughout the day, you think about these things and you meditate on these things and meditate upon suffering, the causes of suffering, the cessation of suffering and path, and meditate upon what it would be like to have, gotten rid of all of the sufferings for yourself and then be able to be in a blissful state and be of most aid to all sentient beings. And thinking about the various steps for cultivating bodhicitta. So if you do that, each week, if you did that every day a little, every week we come and do this practice, or twice a week, whatever it is, you'll have a different feeling a little bit when you do this, because you'll have brought your kind of intensity of, meditating on, sentient beings as your mother, remembering their kindness, wishing to repay their kindness, love through the force of attraction, great compassion, extraordinary attitude, and bodhicitta, or meditating on the equal importance of myself and others, equalizing self and others, and then cherishing myself stinks, cherishing others is better, doing tonlen, love practice, compassion practice, actually doing the exchange of self and others, generating the special recollection of the kindness of others, and then generating an extraordinary attitude in bodhicitta. These are the things that then will allow practices like this to be, more of the causes for our arisal of bodhicitta, because we know there's a mental basis that's necessary for the arisal of bodhicitta when we study Panchen Sonandrapa's general meaning of perfection. There's physical basis, mental basis. And it doesn't say, hey, you just have to be Jeff. It says you have to be a person who has a mind like this. And a mind like this has within it all of these kind of practices and predispositions and kind of concordant ideas that allow for it to have been familiarized with enough to generate a mind, a primary mind of bodhicitta. It's an actual mind. It's not a mental factor like compassion. It's an actual mind that it's just the way your mind works. I'm going to be a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. Like renunciation, it's just the way your mind works, day and night, seeking transcendent liberation. It's really amazing when we can use these logical reasonings to prove to ourselves how we could evolve. So imagine now that you're leading all sentient beings here to be able to be your guest, as a Buddha would figure out a way to get the truth of suchness to every single sentient being. Imagine that you're doing that, and starting obviously with the beings that are real beings that you can imagine, that you've seen with your eyes and heard them speak with your ears, and so forth. And then try to broaden that perspective out to other types of beings that you've read about, that you haven't directly perceived, but you know that the Buddhas have said exist, and you know the Buddha is a reliable guide. The Buddha, has proved through the teachings on impermanence and emptiness and so forth that the Buddha is reliable and teaches things that others don't point out. and these things can be logically proven. So these things that are kind of very hidden phenomena, let's just take a moment and say, hey, it's possible. And the more beings that I connect with, the more bliss that I'll have. So why would I ever, leave out any level of bliss when I'm talking about, achieving all of my own aims? And if it is required for me to work for all sentient beings, leaving none out, for me to achieve all my own aims, then I need to work for all sentient beings. And then we get to the sentient beings, then I've got to find them. And the only kind of map I have right now is the map in the Lam Rim, the map in the sutras. It says there's 6 realms. It says there's these places that are, a couple, 4 that we don't really see. So first we bring all of the beings that we think about, relate to, our loved ones, those strangers, and then difficult beings that we have in our lives here. And hopefully we've, figured out a way to reconcile that word, difficult enough to be able to, see the benefit, the long-term benefit that beings who are difficult or beings who we consider enemies can give us. So we then imagine we bring every one of those different kinds of beings here to the space, this place where you are. And we are imagining these things. Eventually we'll be able to, send our minds wherever we need them to go, and send a body that's along with it that will be of utmost help. But that seems like science fiction at this point. But this is what it says in the texts. And, thus far, 25 years in, I haven't been let down by the logical points in the text. So I start to be able to have a more open mind about this capacity that I will have. And I start to imagine, because just like in the resultant practices, the Tantra practices, we're using imagination. We're using it, this actual method of, believing we already are as the method, and then also while recognizing the lack of inherent existence as the wisdom. So we're doing something a little like that, but doing it kind of from the sutra perspective. We're just imagining that we're, bodhisattvas, or if we're doing it from the Tantra perspective, imagining that we're actually Buddhas doing this. So these are just some points you can make, or imagining that, we're calling, if at another level, we're calling great beings to then gather the beings for us. So it depends on what level. If we can practice, we can imagine that we're calling to the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas, and then they're gathering the sentient beings for us. We could imagine that we are Bodhisattvas. We can imagine that we're Buddhas, but while imagining everything being empty of inherent existence, depending on what level we're meditating on this at. So imagine you bring all beings here to be your guest, to be able to share a gift. Usually we're not apt to share the most important thing that we have, lock it in a safe. We aren't willing to share it. Miserliness, we say, oh, that person's a miser. But when we really look at our own intentions, we really look at our own minds, so are we. We are really very, very protective of what we think we should protect, but we wouldn't be so apt to protect a stranger. We wouldn't be anywhere near ready to protect someone who we dislike, and we wouldn't share anything, sometimes even with loved ones, if it was something that we wanted so much. You see people eyeing the last piece of something, and people are trying to be polite, but you really want it. So we're so apt to have this kind of self-cherishing attitude that isn't willing to kind of broaden its perspective. So this is a meditation that kind of breaks down those walls and says, hey, I'm willing to share and be generous with something that's more precious than anything I've ever been given, anything I could ever have from a material perspective, because I don't have anything that isn't contaminated in terms of material things. Any love that's been given to me hasn't been a pure experience of it. And so we have to look at it from this perspective and understand that that if we want to have a complete happiness and a lack of dissatisfaction, then we have to figure out what it is that causes our dissatisfaction and stop creating it. And the Buddha has shown us what exactly that is. So this is a gift that we're given so freely, of happiness, of a tool for happiness, of a tool to be free from suffering, that's unlike any other gift that's been given to us. So we broaden our perspective and lessen our miserliness and attachment by doing this. So just imagine you bring all sentient beings here and get into the 7-point Vairocana posture if you can. Imagine that you're inspiring all beings. Now imagine that the entire merit field begins to fill in the space in front of you. Imagine that Buddha Shakyamuni is in the space in front of you, and all of the holy enlightened beings, imagining Khensa Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, imagining Geshe Lobsang Gompo and Khensa Lobsang Gyatso and Demalocha Rinpoche and Geshe Dorje Damdula and Umzala Geshe Aga and Geshe Malatens and Ladrin and Jeffrey Hopkins, Chowder Rinpoche, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, any being you consider an enlightened being. Imagine that you and all sentient beings are viewing these holy, enlightened beings who no longer have afflictive obstructions or obstructions to omniscience, who are looking into your eyes with complete love and compassion, the way that only an enlightened being can have. Their only expectation is that you achieve your own freedom from suffering and your own bliss. There's no vested interest in it for them other than that. And they're looking into your eyes with that kind of love and compassion. The way that no contaminated love, anybody who's ever loved you could ever look into your eyes. Imagine the holy beings of the extensive deeds lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Maitreya and Asanga and Vasubandhu and Dignaga and Dharmakirti and Gunaprabha and Shakyaprabha and Muktasena, Hare Bhadra and Lama Salingpa and Lord Atisha, beings of the profound view lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Manjushri and Nagarjuna and Buddha Palita and Aryadeva and Shantideva and Chandrakirti and so forth. And then Chandrarashita and Baba Vega and Kamalashila, imagining all of these holy beings, Lama Salingpa and Lord Atisha, imagining Atisha passing down the Lamrim lineage to Drone Tompa, imagining the 3 old Kadampa lineages, imagining the holy beings of the Nyingma, Padma Sambhava is there, the Sakya Kunga Nimpo, Sakya Randawa, Sakya Pandita, the beings of the Kaju lineages, the Karmapas and so forth, the beings of the Galupa lineage, Lama Tsongkhapa, Kirtip J, Joseph J, Basu Chuji Jetson, Benchen Sanandrapa, Jayan Sheba, Janjarupi Dorje, Gonju Jibi Wampo, Purba Jog, Jetsumpa, all 7th Dalai Lama, all of these holy beings, highest Yoga Tantra deities, performance Tantra deities, action Tantra deities, all of the 35 Buddhas, all of the protector deities are all here in the space in front of us. We're so open to being able to receive their blessings. Imagine that they're looking at the perspective of our minds and nurturing us and figuring out ways to help us to understand the truth of suchness for ourselves. We will become inhabitants of the merit field. We will become holy beings who've gotten rid of the afflictive obstructions and obstructions to omniscience. We merely haven't purified our minds yet. And the only way we'll purify our minds is by starting little by little, cleansing our minds of the stains that have been there since beginningless time. But we also have a mind that's in the nature of clear light and unsullied, that's been there since beginningless time. The mind will go on forever. These stains are adventitious and can be removed. The way that we remove these stains is by having a union of bodhicitta and the wisdom realizing emptiness. We have to go through the stages of the path, from the path of accumulation to preparation to meditation. I'm sorry, the path of accumulation to preparation to seeing to meditation to no more learning. We have to go through these stages of purification. And we do so by generating bodhicitta, becoming bodhisattvas, and then having a more and more subtle understanding of the nature of reality. And subtle understanding at its most subtle level allows us to go from the path of meditation to no more learning. So here we'll recite the Heart Sutra, which contains the implicit teachings of the emptiness of the nature of inherent existence of all phenomena. And then implicitly, this teaching goes over the 5 Mahayana paths: the path of accumulation, preparation, seeing, meditation, and no more learning. So now imagine that you are leading all sentient beings in the recitation of this prayer, and that before we recite it, just recite the prayer of noble conduct. Just leave that up, prayer of noble conduct, that says this: in the language of gods, nagas, and yakshas, in the language of demons and of humans too, in however many kinds of speech there may be, I shall proclaim the Dharma in the language of all. Lai ke dan lu dan no jin ke drubun da dan mi ke nan dan drowa gunji dra nan jit samba dan che ke du da ji juten do. Okay, now that everybody can understand me, we'll read the Heart Sutra, the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha of monks and a great gathering of the Sangha of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the Samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajaparamita, saw in this way, saw the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajaparamita addressed in this way? Noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajaparamita should see in this way, seeing the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form, emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics. There is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity, no purity. There is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no eye, dhatu, up to no mind, dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind, conscious, dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance, up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the 3 times by means of Prajaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequal mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering, should be known as truth, since there is no deception. The Prajaparamita mantra is said in this way: Teata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasangate Buddhi Soha. Thus, Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son, noble family, thus it is, O son, noble family, thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice when the Blessed One had said this. Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. Imagine if you had no fear. No fear. It doesn't exist. Wow. It's a promise. It's made in the Heart Sutra. When you study the Heart Sutra, there's a promise made. There's no obscuration of mind. There is no fear. Kala jube ne jodamba ne ngje de jenga yi de jen juba bolama yi bushin zi ne zonga droso la shatzelo agasamara jesanda rasamara agasamara jesanda. Agasamara jesanda rasamara abede adon gate gate paragate prasangate buddhizo abagonju sunji gaye de bedoji she bodoji bedoji she wadoji jagi baji mede beje sanji je ringa yeso ha kerin jonja jeju jewa dan midun be jendan jewa dan tamba dunjin bonzon zonjoji daji de jan den da de le jo. Make a mandala offerings, request for teaching, imagining you're offering everything beautiful in the universe to the teacher, but really in the merit field, because this teaching is only possible because Khyentse Geshe Wanda gave me teaching, His Holiness the Dalai Lama gave me, et cetera, et cetera. So we look at this in terms of the request for teachings for the entire teacher in the entire merit field. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas, I wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love. and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Sanjay Chodan Zoji Janan La, Janju Bada Dani Jazuji, Tagi Juji Jibe Sonanji, Drala Benji, Sanjay Drubasho, Sanjay Chodan Zoji Janan La, Janju Bada Dani Jazuji, Tagi Juji Jibe Sonanji, Drala Benji, Sanjay Drubasho, Sanjay Chodan Zoji Janan La, Janju Bada Dani Jazuji, Tagi Juji Jibe Sonanji, Drala Benji, Sanjay Drubasho. Enthused by great compassion, you taught the immaculate Dharma to dispel all perverted views. To you, the Buddha, Gautama, I pay homage. If you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. If you're attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you're attached to your own self-interest, you have no bodhicitta. If there is grasping, you do not have the view. Okay. So wonderful to be here today with all of you. And we're looking again at the medium scope that deals with the Four Noble Truths and so forth. And I was looking at the third Dalai Lama's, the Gyalwa Tsunan Gyatso's commentary on the Lam Rim. It's one of the 8 commentaries and consider, the 8 great texts that are commentaries on the Atisha's Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment. And Lama Tsongkhapa's 3 big, the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment is in that category, as well as the medium stages of the path and the abbreviated stages of the path, and the 5th Dalai Lama's spoken words of Manjushri, and swift path and easy path by the Panchen Lamas, etc. In this text, I'm sure I left one out. I wasn't counting as I was just saying them, but this text, The Essence of Refined Gold, was a text by the 3rd Dalai Lama. And it's really very practical. It's very nice. It's also very similar, you will guess, to everything you've heard. But he quotes Lama Tsongkhapa when he talks about, why we need this teaching of the medium scope. What is it about it that is so important to know? 8 sufferings, 6 sufferings, 3 sufferings. Why is this so important at this level? If you want to be free from suffering altogether, if this is something you want, we're not in the great scope yet, where we would talk about, being a Buddha. We're talking about just and having bliss. We're talking about at the level of just wanting to abandon personal suffering altogether. That is the foundation for bodhicitta. So you can't get bodhicitta and want to be a Buddha if you don't thoroughly know this part. So what's the point of this identification in this kind of going over suffering? It's in order to give you conviction, even after the breakup or the broken leg or the person dies, even after the pain, the acute pain of that subsides, you'll still understand and want to get out of cyclic existence because you'll have identified it clearly. So in the 3rd Dalai Lama's summary of the medium scope kind of section, he says, to quote Lama Tsongkhapa, so this is from the Lamrim Duden, the abbreviated stages of the path to enlightenment, the songs of spiritual experience, as it's also called. We read it on Lama Tsongkhapa Day, just on Thursday. And here Lama Tsongkhapa says, if you do not contemplate the noble truth of suffering, the fallacy of samsara, the wish to be free of samsara won't arise. So he's not even saying here, he's saying like basically the same thing as Dharmakirti. You don't really have the wish to leave samsara. Even though you think you do, if it's just based on tragedy or I've just had enough of this suffering of change, or suffering of suffering, rather. If it's just that I've had enough of the suffering of suffering, then life will get okay. The bait will taste good again, enough for you to not want to be liberated, not wish to be free. So he's Tsongkhapa makes this point. If you don't contemplate the source of suffering, the door to samsara, says first, if you don't contemplate the first noble truth, you're not going to be free from samsara. And this wish, the third Dalai Lama tells you what it would look like. And this is why I'm reading it. It's pretty interesting. So if you don't contemplate what is the origin of suffering, the door to samsara, what opens the door into cyclic existence, you'll never discover the means of cutting the root. You won't know what you got to get rid of, what to discard and what to keep. You'll have no idea if you haven't studied what causes this thing that you found that you find disgusting. Base yourself on renunciation of cyclic existence. Be tired of it. Cherish knowledge of the chains that bind you to the wheel of existence. So it's saying, cherish this knowledge about all this icky stuff. Cherish this. And how do you know if it's worked in your mind? You say, oh, I want to be a Buddha. Well, here, this is the step before I want to be a Buddha. I just want to be liberated. I don't want suffering anymore. What is the mark in your mind of that having occurred? So Lama Tsongkhapa says day and night seeking transcendent liberation. So that's fine. Okay. Day and night, every day and night, I'm seeking to be happy, free from suffering. That doesn't have the kind of depth I think this feels like. When the thought that aspires to transcend the world arises within you, as strongly as the thought of finding an exit would arise in a person caught in a burning house, you have become a spiritual aspirant of medium perspective. So now Lama Tsongkhapa is saying, okay, day and night, you're seeking transcendent liberation in the three principal paths. So what would that look like if you were day and night seeking transcendent liberation? You would be as thrown into your practice, going towards that goal as you would a door, looking for a door out of a burning house, because you would see cyclic existence as a burning house to get out of, plagued with suffering, no happiness that's real, and everyone around you being fooled and not knowing you're in a burning house. And this is the point that's made. So what I want to do today is, I just got this book, The Swift Path, by the first Panchen Lama, which is a really intense practice manual. I've looked at it before, but I've never had the hard copy, but I know the sections. So the reason I was late for class is because I was like, oh yeah, there's a whole meditation in this section on what we kind of just went over. And it has, when I went to check it, it has the source citing for something that I told you I'd source cite. So I was like, all right, this is what we're going to do. So it says, reflect on the general sufferings of samsara. So this text is an integrated text, the integrated path. So you're finding Tantra and bodhicitta in the section on reflecting on samsara. So I'm just warning you, if you're trying to throw this in the box of personal liberation, just be careful, because what I'm going to read to you first is going to be kind of like, that doesn't sound like the medium scope. And that's what is incredible about this text. It starts to show you how it all works together even more. And it was, yeah. So this is what we're going to do today. It's a very short section, but it's just so powerful. I couldn't help but go to it. Okay. So it says, reflect on the general sufferings of samsara. So now you're just ready to hear your norm. And then he says, while meditating on the guru deity above your crown, recite as follows. Wow. You're talking inseparability of the Lama and Yidam on your crown. And we're talking about the medium scope. So we need to tear some of the labels down. They're put in these orders so that we can gain spiritual experience in a way that will work. But if we just try to discard something, that we think is below us because it was taught in the earlier stages, we're missing the point of the stages of the path and the integrated path to Buddhahood. We really are. And that was something that the Tibetan tradition showed, oh my gosh, how to integrate all of these things together. And wow, the oral tradition that came out of it's incredible. So it says, by training in the ethics of abandoning the 10 non-virtues, I will attain an upper rebirth, free from the suffering of the lower rebirths. So here we've just like arrived, at the door of the medium scope, even though we just put the deity on our crown. He's thrown us now right back to, we just arrived at the door of the medium scope because we were just at the small scope and we were looking at all the lower realms of cyclic existence and how bad they are and looking to have high status. We were looking to have higher realm rebirth. And now we're going to find out, because we're entering the door of the medium scope, that anything in cyclic existence is a problem, not just if we're an animal or a hungry ghost or a hell being. Anything in cyclic existence is a problem. And all of the things that you don't think are a problem, you may think that, hey, I just need to have a better human rebirth. Maybe I can get one of those next time. And that's liberation. We come to find out that no matter what you get, when you get it in cyclic existence, what you get will get you upset. Period, full stop. The saying, you get what you get and you don't get upset. Well, everything that you get in samsara will make you upset. Full stop. And this is what you learn. So they're like, hey, we just said, abandon the 10 non-virtues so that you can be free from the lower realms. We just talked about how important this is and learned about this connected nature to non-virtue and the lower realms of cyclic existence and, the coarsest types of suffering, and so forth. So it says that, however, as long as I have not attained a liberation in which suffering has been eradicated from the root, I can never truly be happy. So this is a meditation manual. So just let me make it clear again. So this is a meditation that we're doing when we're reading this. By analogy, say there's a criminal who's to be executed in a month and is tortured daily by having hot tar dripped on him or her, beaten with sticks and so forth. Fortunately, because someone in power intercedes on his behalf, he's spared from the pain of the daily beatings of the sticks. Nonetheless, as the day of execution draws closer and closer, he's never really at ease. So no matter what, Geshe Dorje Damdu talks about, this prisoner, who's in a terrible jail cell and, versus a prisoner who's in a jail that has like a Starbucks and swimming pools and stuff, and they're both going to be executed. Which person is going to be more apt to try to find an escape route? One who's truly recognizes the downfalls of this. One who would really be smart enough and say, that's great, there's a Starbucks here, there's all this nice swimming pool here, but I'm going to be executed soon. I'm going to be forced into, nothing, is permanent in terms of my experience within cyclic existence. Nonetheless, as the day of execution draws closer and closer, he's never truly at ease. Similarly, as long as I have not attained a liberation in which suffering has been eradicated from the root, no matter what kind of upper rebirths I may attain, once the projecting results of my previous good karma are exhausted, I will fall into a lower realm and be confronted with countless sufferings. So we're meditating then on, like what? Furthermore, as long as I'm reborn in samsara through the force of karma and afflictions, my rebirth will not transcend the nature of suffering. Since foes turn into friends and friends turn into foes, harm and benefit in samsara are so unpredictable, are they not? So we're meditating on this. Accordingly, Nagarjuna says, the father turns into the son, the mother turns into the wife, the foe turns into the friend. Their reverse occurs. There is never certainty in samsara. Then we find this quote, and it's from the classifications of karma in the Kangjur, and it has to do with Mugliana. and a story. So I'll read the quote first, and I'll explain the quote. So it says, he eats the flesh of his father, hits his mother, and cradles in the lap his evil-doing enemy. The wife gnaws at the bones of her husband. The events in samsara are a joke. So then what does this mean? This is weird. So it says, Mugliana encounters a householder cradling a child in his lap, eating a fish, and throwing the bones at a black dog. Mugliana, who was the foremost in psychic power among the disciples of the Buddha, saw that the fish was actually the father of the householder in a past life. He used to fish at the pond behind his house, and due to attachment to his son, was reborn among the fishes in the pond. So we see the subtle workings of karma and our attachments, and how our anger and our lack of ethics could cause us to be an animal, but still be connected in some way because of attachment, and then be eaten by the person who loved us or we love more than anyone in the world. That's how disgusting cyclic existence is. The dog was actually the mother of the householder in a past life. Due to the attachment to her son, she was reborn as his dog. On one occasion, the householder caught his wife sleeping with another man and killed him out of anger. Out of his attachment to the householder's wife, the adulterer was reborn as her child. This shakes things up. I just got the hair raised. This shakes it up. You know, you're suffering of aging, sickness, and death. That's fine. But you start talking like this starts to like shake the framework of the way I think things are, the permanent nature of my relationships with everything, the certainty of cyclic existence that I think is there, that's not, this permanent kind of unitary, independent nature that I think everything that I want to have it around me has. Wow, it's really, but then I'm so willing to be flexible with it at times and change an enemy into a friend and a friend into an enemy. But I see it as concrete. But then another moment, I'm willing to change it. This is how sick and twisted our minds are, even in the one life here. And then we come to find out this is what happens from that sick and twisted kind of thinking. Out of his attachment to the householder's wife, so as to induce disillusionment with respect to samsara, Mugliana taught about these confusing relations by uttering the following verse. He eats his father's flesh, tosses the bones and scraps at his mother, and tends to his wife's baby, obscured by ignorance and attachment. So this is a verse that he recites. And others say that he's beating, the dog with a stick. That is coming to try to eat the bones of the fish. Some of the commentaries talks about this. Anyway, so going back to the Panchen Lama's points, as taught, there's never certainty in samsara. So here we are. It was where we were. There's no certainty. Your father in a previous life can become your son in this life. Your mother in a previous life can become your wife in this life. Your friend in a previous life can be your foe in this life. Your foe in an earlier part of this life can become your friend in the later part. Your friend in a later part of this life can become your foe in the later part, and so forth. The Questions of Sabahu Tantra says, sometimes foes turn into friends and friends into foes. Likewise, sometimes friends as foes become strangers. Strangers can also turn into foes, and likewise into friends. Intelligence one should never develop attachment. Turn away thoughts taking delight in friends and set yourself comfortably in virtue, and reflect as follows: no matter how much I partake in the pleasures of samsara, I will never achieve true satisfaction. The Play in Full Sutra says, Your Majesty, even if a person were to obtain all the pleasures of the gods and all the exquisite sensual delights of humans, he would still not be content and would search for more. As said, even if a person were to obtain all the sensual delights of gods and humans, he or she would not attain lasting satisfaction, the longing for which lasting satisfaction is the principal malady and anguish, as every satisfaction derived from sensual delights is subject to decay. Aryashura says, Procuring these sensual delights, relying on them daily, and hoarding them never brings contentment. So there's no malady more serious than that. Purposely making yourself not be content. At least once you've read and heard these things and studied and had logic and reasoning. No matter how marvelous the bodies I acquire are, I must discard them again and again. They're not dependable. The letter to a friend says, even having sakra worthy of worship by the world, become sakra, some god, you will eventually fall to earth through the force of karma. Even having become a wheel-turning king, you will eventually become a slave. Having obtained the great pleasures of sensual delights in the gods' realms and happiness free from attachment in the Brahma realms, know that you will again gain yourself suffering uninterruptedly as fuel for fires and unrelenting hells. I have been taking rebirth in samsara since beginningless time, so there is no limit to my rebirths. Nagarjuna says the amount of milk imbibed by a person exceeds the 4 oceans. But know that the wanderer in samsara who follows the ways of ordinary beings still has far more to drink. Ordinary beings have been each other's mother, and the breast milk each has been suckled exceeds the amount of water of the oceans. If they still did not strive toward the path without foreseeable end to rebirths in samsara, the amount of breast milk each will suckle in the future will exceed that already consumed. And we're looking at this in terms of all of these different strangers to us. So similarly, ordinary beings having become foes have decapitated one another, their heads high, piled high, surpass the Brahma realms, while others, having become friends, weep over one another's deeds. If these tears of sorrow were collected, they would exceed even the waters of the oceans. If they still do not strive towards the path, without any foreseeable ends to rebirths in samsara, the tears shed will exceed that already shed. Accordingly, eliminating sorrow says the amount of hot molten copper you drank when you were in the hell realms time and time again exceeds the waters in the oceans. The mass of filth you ate as you were a dog is far greater than the size of Mount Meru, the king of mountains. The drops of tears you shed weeping when you were parted from your friends in samsara cannot be contained even by the oceans. If your heads chopped off during disputes were piled high, they would reach high into the Brahma realms. No matter how much I partake in the splendors of samsara, in time I must relinquish them. The acquisition of such pleasures is capricious. All that has been accrued will be spent. This is from a sutra. That which is high will fall. Those who will have gathered will disperse. The living will die. The garland of birth story says, old intimate friends will be separated by death, and great sorrow arises. This is the certainty in the world. Since I will go to the next life alone, I cannot rely upon companions. Engaging in bodhisattva deeds says, although this body arose as a unit, the bones and flesh with which it was born will break up and separate. What need is there to mention friends? This is just empirical reality. There's no arguing this. We feel like these things are so static and permanent, and we don't look further towards what really matters. At birth, I was born alone. And at death, I'll die alone too. If my distress cannot be borne by others, at what use are hindering friends? And this doesn't mean don't have friends. It means that my relationship to these beings is what needs to be kind of fixed. Recite as follows. At this time of having obtained once this physical human basis, endowed with the complete freedoms and privileges difficult to find and greatly meaningful when found, no matter what it takes, I will attain the precious state of a perfect, complete Buddha, the supreme liberation in which all sufferings of samsara have been abandoned. Guru, deity, please bless that I may do so. So here we see he goes right back to the Mahayana. You know, may I realize these things for myself because they're necessary for me to realize for myself in order to become a Buddha. Guru, who's inseparable from the deity, please bless me to get this. And as Pabunka Rinpoche, says in the commentary on the foundation of all good qualities, like now, like from sitting here on. And this is unrealistic for someone like me who has, so many kind of afflictions within my mind. But the more I make these aspirations, and the more and more I practice and study and become convinced of the importance of it, the less the vibrance is, the vibrancy of these kind of states of mind are. So it's something that is amazing to see here now, that it's saying, I've got this human life of leisure and opportunity. It's difficult to achieve and easily lost, right? When we look at the foundation of all good qualities, it's, the numbers are difficult because there's a lot more lower beings than higher beings, and the example's difficult because we look at, how rare it is, like this tortoise popping its head up every 1,000 years or 100 years, whatever it is, it's going to be hard to happen. And there's like a yolk floating somewhere in the ocean, and he or she happens to pop their head through it. And then it's difficult to achieve this human basis by reason of that its causes are hard to make. We need to have ethics. We need to have perfect stainless aspirations somewhere. We did this already. So in order, that for us to be human, we have to have done these things, made perfect stainless aspirations, and engaged in ethical behavior, and engaged in the other 5 perfections. We have to have, in order to have this rare state come together, even though it's contaminated and has a lot of problems. It's a basis from which we can really practice spirituality, because the suffering isn't so great that that's all it is. So we just don't have the strength to do anything but suffer, like the lower realms usually, or strength to do anything but seek our, needs. But there's enough suffering there for us to get it, that there's, we don't, we're not tricked by some of the higher realm stuff that goes on, where it's just good all the time, seemingly, until you die. And then it's like, uh-oh. Here we know we have a pleasant, as one Lama said, a pleasant mix of suffering. It's one pleasant, meaning that we have some windows in there in which we could actually practice spirituality. So now there's a meditation that's really beautiful that I'll just read to you, that I've heard before, but I'll read to you. And then, we'll move on. So this is from the Panchen Lamas, Panchen Losang Yeshe, the first Panchen Lama. And it says, from having made supplications in this manner. So you just made this kind of supplication. So backing up, going to the beginning of the Lam Rim, 6 preparations. You make the various offering, you make clean the room, and arrange images of enlightenment, and then put out offerings in a beautiful manner, and then get into, a 7-point Vairocana posture and clear your mind, and then imagine the merit field, and then you make a 7-limb offering, and then you make further supplications. And in those further supplications, they're like this. This is what a supplication would be like. So in mandala offerings, you'll see the mandala offering is made, and then further supplications are made. And in this 6th preparation, you can do mandala offerings in the offering section of the 7-limb prayer also, but the mandala offering in the supplication is this offering connected to supplication. So it's a mandala offering. I offer to this, perfect world, to the Buddhas, may I be blessed. So you see how it's connected to the mandala offering. I'm offering this perfect world. May you bless me at this time. I've obtained at once this human basis, endowed with the perfect, complete freedoms and privileges, difficult to find and gratefully meaningful when found. No matter what it takes, I will attain the precious state of a perfect, complete Buddha, the supreme liberation in which all the sufferings of samsara have been abandoned. Guru, deity, please bless that I may do so. So this would be that kind of supplication that we find in the 6th preparation. And the point of it is to be able to, from sitting here on, may I, if I, can't do it, may I do it as quick as possible by having the intervening things that, someone who could emanate bodies could do to make me one day be able to get up from this seat and have my mind just be renunciation, be a mind that is renunciation. So we're trying to pack it in more and more and more. And then there's a visualization that's done here now. From having made supplications in this manner, so you're making these supplications, may I. So if we had Pabunka Rinpoche's commentary on the source of all my good, we'd see how he ends each kind of stanza, because in the source of all my good, it says, bless me to perceive, bless me, So the Pabunka Rinpoche has a very similar point that's made here, please bless me to be able to, from this point on, be able to engage in the practices in this way. So it's saying, from having made supplications in this manner, now you're imagining a reaction has happened. So it's not just static, like, oh, God help me. There's an interaction that's happening, and this interaction is actually happening. I know this sounds weird, but whenever you call upon the Buddhas, because of being omniscient, you say specific names or whatever, you call upon Buddha, they show up. You can't necessarily see them. You don't have the karma to see them, but the Dharmakaya hears you and sends some sort of helper, to show up. So just think like that too is good. Thinking like that too is good. So having made these supplications, imagine that streams of 5 colored nectars along with light rays descend from the body of the guru deity above your crown. So you have in this meditation, you have your Lama, in our case, Khensa Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, who's inseparable from Aryatara. And you're imagining that these light rays, white light rays, yellow light rays, red light rays, blue light rays, green light rays are all descending down on you from the deity who's at your crown. So you're imagining that and this is related to the 5 Buddha families, I would assume. There's a commentary on the commentary. You're imagining, these different light rays and nectars that are, dissolving into your body, descending from this body of the Buddha, the deity at your crown, or however you feel best. But here we're going to follow this. Permeating my body and mind, and also those of all sentient beings. They cleanse us of all the misdeeds and obstructions that we've amassed since beginningless time, and in particular, those misdeeds and obstructions that prevent the special realization of supreme liberation in which the sufferings of samsara have been abandoned. Our bodies become the nature of transparent light. Our lifespan, merit, and all excellent qualities of scripture and realization develop and increase. The special realization of the precious state of a perfect, complete Buddha, the supreme liberation in which the sufferings of samsara have been abandoned, is produced in our mental continuum. So, wow, he takes the medium scope and uses this kind of tantric visualization and justifies it by that, yes, a Buddha is free from the suffering of samsara, is free from the afflictive obstructions. The goal of the hero solitary realizer, the Hinayana, is to be free from the afflictive obstructions. So here it's saying that. That's the goal of the Buddha. It's in the goal. It's in the goal. Wow. So it's just showing you how this is all in the goal. The small scope, the medium scope, all of these practices, they're all contained within the way you realize the goal. It said something really, it says here, you've had misdeeds and obstructions we've amassed since beginningless time, in particular, those misdeeds and obstructions that prevent the special realization of supreme liberation in which the sufferings of samsara have been abandoned. Wow. So you're saying I want supreme liberation. When we look at high status and certain goodness has 2 categories. One is just regular liberation, which is nirvana, abiding nirvana of Hinayana. And then there's non-abiding nirvana of Buddha. So here it's saying, I want Buddhahood, which of course is free from the suffering of samsara, which is the goal of the Hinayanist. I want the supreme state. And what else do I get alongside that? Why would I go for more? Well, I get the supreme state comes with bliss that the lower state of liberation and abiding nirvana of a Hinayanist doesn't come with. But it comes with the supreme state, the freedom that the lower state gets as part of the package. So it's really interesting to show the integration of the path. Here, may I become a Buddha in order to be free from these 6 types of suffering for the sake of all sentient beings. And imagining then that it occurs through this supplication, and then this supplication takes place, and then you imagine that the Lama, who's inseparable from the deity, showers light rays and nectars down on you in some way, and allows you just for a moment to experience the resultant state. We all have Buddha nature. Our mind is emptiness, and the Buddha's mind's emptiness is the same nature. Now, the contents, not the same. I have stains and messiness, but they can be removed because mine and the Buddha's mind have the same nature. So it's incredible to see the integration of the path. And I wanted to just read this to you today. I'm sure we're about out of time. We're out of time. But just to give you another kind of resource, Wisdom Publications, Swift Path. It's a short text, and it's really a nice glancing meditation over these topics, and very, very profound, because you won't find it often in the medium scope where we're talking about the Lama being inseparable from the deity and these kinds of practices taking place. Now, there wasn't a self-generation that took place. I understand that. But it's just interesting to see this integrated path. So with that, if you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. If you're attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you're attached to your own self-interest, you have no bodhicitta. If there is grasping, you do not have the view. Prayer for the flourishing of Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings. Though he's the father, producer of all conquerors, as a conqueror's son, he produced the thought of upholding the conqueror's Dharma and infinite worlds through this truth. May the conqueror Lozang's teachings flourish. When in the presence of Buddha Indraketi made his vow, the conqueror and his offspring praised his powerful courage. Through this truth, may the conqueror Lozang's teachings flourish. The lineage of pure view and conduct might spread. He offered a white crystal rosary to the sage who gave him a conch and prophesied. Through this truth, may the conqueror Lozang's teachings flourish. His pure view free of eternity or destruction, is pure meditation cleansed of dark fading and fog, is pure conduct practiced according to the conqueror's orders. May the conqueror Lozang's teachings flourish. Learned, since he extensively sought out learning, reverently, rightly applying it to himself, good, dedicating all for beings and the doctrine, may the conqueror Lozang's teachings flourish. Though through being sure that all scriptures, definitive and interpretive, were without contradiction, advice for one person's practice, he stopped all misconduct. May the conqueror Lozang's teachings flourish. Listening to explanation of the 3 Pitakas, realized teachings, practice of the 3 highest higher trainings, his skilled and accomplished life story is amazing. May the conqueror Lozang's teachings flourish. Outwardly calmed and subdued by the hearer's conduct, inwardly trusting in the 2 stages practice, he allied without clash the good paths of Sutra and Tantra. May the conqueror Lozang's teachings flourish. Combining voidness explained, as the causal vehicle, with great bliss achieved by method, the effect vehicle. Heart essence of 80,000 Dharma bundles, may the conqueror Lozang's teachings flourish. By the power of the ocean of oath-bound doctrine protectors, like the main guardians of the 3 beings' paths, the quick-acting Lord, Vaishravana, Karmayana, may the conqueror Lozang's teachings flourish. In short, by the lasting of glorious gurus' lives, by the earth being full of good, learned, reverend holders of the teaching, and by the increase of the power of patrons, may the conqueror Lozang's teachings flourish. And may beings like Khensur Geshe Wandak remain in this world and continue to be the example of someone who clearly understood that they were in a burn, or showed that they were in a burning house in their mind they wanted to get out of, and were seeking that exit every moment. Just think about it, every moment, if you're going to die in a burning house, but every moment of that time to get to that freedom from the burning house, you're just getting out, trying to get out. Imagine what our minds would be like, because We know what our minds do. Mine doesn't look like that. But then we see examples of beings whose minds do look like that. And then I see my mind looking more like it. So I'm thinking, wow, this stuff really does have an effect. It just doesn't like taking a pill and having an instant result that we're used to, or going through a drive-through and then getting my French fries and, putting more salt on and cramming them in my face so that I feel sick in like 5 minutes. I don't even see it at that level, that's not, that's the suffering of change. Like even empirical, like that's going to make you sick. Like, so how am I going to, if I don't really study more, how will I ever get the fact that something that could make me happy till the end of my life and I have to separate from it is a problem? How would I ever get it if I can't even get that the French fries that make me sick in 5 minutes? That's how our minds, and then we believe that there's going to be a satisfaction that occurs by the French fry that causes us to be sick. Wow, it's really weird, right? Like we think I want satisfaction. I'll be really satisfied when I get this thing that makes me sick. It's really weird. It's a weird evolution that takes place in our little silly minds. Fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers. And I want French fries right now when I say this. By the way, I'm like, boy, I can really go for. It's just so strange. I have to be honest. What just occurred? I'm a practitioner, so this is what we watch our mind, right? I put this thing together and I tasted McDonald's French fries and was like, those are pretty good. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings of all sentient beings, in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Zandrapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandal to you, precious Guru. Something so important, again, Jeffrey Hopkins said that we have to keep a sense of humor about this, or we're going to just lose our minds, really. We have to keep a little sense of humor about this. Our protector is Paul de Lama. May all the beings who are experiencing difficulties in places like Tennessee and Kentucky and south of there that are experiencing this terrible storm, all the beings who are involved in the wars in Ukraine and Russia and Israel and Palestine, all of the people who are being tortured, all of the beings that are just not being able to even hear the truth of suchness because of the immense suffering that's going on, may they quickly be able to have all of their minds at peace. May their material resources be restored. May they feel protected and loved. May they meet with the Dharma. May they have every single opportunity to know how to never have to experience an environment that has such chaos and such suffering, and a mind that has to experience it in such concrete ways. And I really pray that through the power of the truth of this teaching and through the power of the truth of this Drapasundre mantra, may all of those beings without a protector have a protector, those without love have love, those without material things have material things, those without the Dharma have the Dharma in a way that they'll be able to truly understand it. Om Vajrapani Harya Griva Garuda Om Ve. And I recite this mantra not because I have some special power, because Drapasundre does, and I have the transmission of it to be able and then receive the initiation. So I'm just a conduit of the lineage to you, but it's, I don't ever want to make it seem like I think I have something. I have a lineage that I share with you. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri, and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors Sutra 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. Prayer for the long life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Chen Rezig in person here in our world we're so fortunate to have. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness for beings. All powerful Avalokiteshvara Tenzin Gyatso, may you stay until samsara's end. And then a prayer of supplication to Nanjo Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche. A complex yogi poses as a simple monk. Homage to Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, our precious spiritual friend who's inseparable from Aryatara. I fully prostrate, covering as many atoms of the earth as possible, to your pure body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities. I offer to you drinking water, bathing water, flowers, incense, candles, scented water, food, and music purified by Om, 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 Om. The rarity of having 1 million wish-fulfilling gems is a common occurrence compared to meeting with a holy teacher like you, who placed the complete path to Buddhahood in our childlike hands. Just like Atisha, who came to Tibet with a lamp to dispel the darkness of ignorance, you, kind abbot, arrived in the West with a lineage purer than a diamond and begged us never to be satisfied with partial instructions. Teachings of the extensive deeds and profound view lineages flowed from your lips like nectar for our ears that elucidated the teachings for beings of 3 capacities. Now that sound has stopped. All composite things are impermanent. You told us that all of your teachers passed away and understood the sadness in treating us to continue our studies. The Buddha does not wash away the negativities of beings, nor does he remove their miseries by his hands. His spiritual realizations are not transferred to them. It's by teaching the truth of suchness that beings are liberated. We are not prepared to take this difficult journey to the highest goodness of Buddhahood without your continued guidance. The sadness in our hearts would be too overwhelming. May you swiftly return to this world and take care of us in all of our lives, wherever we may be, never leaving our hearts and crowns. May all sentient beings perfectly realize renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness, so they know who you really are. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope that this is helpful somehow throughout your week to integrate the teachings and to see that these are really instructions for practice. And we do things like catch our minds getting sucked into stuff like I just did. And we see that how absurd that is. And then we start to relate, okay, so if that's absurd, what else is absurd? So the most absurd things become signs for us that we definitely haven't gotten wise to the more subtly absurd things. Thank you.